Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Danny C, and in this video, I'll be explaining why you should never sell a house you inherit and how doing so helps build generational wealth. I'll walk you through some financial use cases and prove to you how much more money you can make by renting out a house that you inherit instead of selling it. I'll also tell you how to avoid some common mistakes people make when renting out a house so that when you rent out a house that you inherit, you can do so stress-free. With that being said, let's get started. So what makes buying a home such a singular wealth-building method in the US economy? Well, it appreciates. Homeownership is the most common way people build wealth in this country. And typically after 30 years, homeowners will either have a paid-off asset to live in rent-free or to rent out to generate income for themselves. Historically, home prices have appreciated annually at an average rate between 3% to 5%. Paying off the balance of a mortgage month by month is kind of like a forced savings mechanism that's also building equity at the same time. If you want to build wealth, buy a home. If you want to build generational wealth, keep the homes your family owns and pass them down to your children. So what does generational wealth mean, and why is it so important? Generational wealth basically means wealth that is passed down from one generation to the next. A child born into a wealthy family is 6 times more likely to become a wealthy adult than a child who grows up poor. Homeownership has long been a central part of this equation. According to the Federal Reserve, in 2019, the average net worth of a homeowner in America was $231,420, compared to just $5,200 for a renter. The importance is even more staggering for people of color. For example, wealth from equity in a home constitutes 51% of total wealth from the average white household, but 71% for Black households, meaning homeownership plays a vital role in building wealth within the Black community. If you've ever heard the hashtag "Don't Sell Grandma's House," this is what that refers to. All right, now that we've got that stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and jump over to my makeshift blackboard, and I'll walk you through a couple use cases that show you how you can actually make more money by renting out a place that you inherit versus selling it. All right, for the first use case, we're assuming that the house you inherit is free and clear of debt, meaning the house has been paid off and there's no mortgage on the home. Let's say the home value of the house you inherit today is $150,000. And we'll also assume that we can get about $1,500 a month in rent. We've already said that there's no mortgage on the house, so we'll put 0 there. Property taxes, let's assume around 1%, so we'll say $125 a month. Home insurance, we'll say about $200 a month. Property management is typically around 10% of the monthly rent, so we'll put $150 there. Capital expenditures and maintenance, let's go for about 15%, so we'll say $225 a month. Now, capital expenditures essentially means big ticket items that you would eventually have to replace on a house over time. So, replacing a roof, or an air conditioning unit, stuff like that we can classify as capital expenditures. And maintenance are the typical things that you would need to do on a monthly or yearly basis to upkeep and maintain the home. For vacancy, which essentially means that over a period of a year, you assume that the house is going to be vacant for some time, so you want to factor in the amount of rent you may not get during that time. So let's just say, in this case, 10%, so $150. The total of all of these expenses equals out to $850. Now, when you subtract this total expenses from the rent you get per month, that leaves you with a profit before taxes of $650 a month. Imagine having $650 after expenses every month in your pocket. Not bad, huh? Now, so let's summarize this. We said that rent was $1,500, total expenses was $850 a month, and profit was $650 a month. For your reserve fund, you'll build up $4,500 per year, or $13,500 in just 3 years. Now, this reserve fund comes from your capital expenditures, maintenance, and vacancy that you've been putting away every month for the last year. If you were to add up your monthly profit for 1 year, you would generate $7,800. Now, if you were to do that over a 20-year period, you would be pocketing well over $156,000. This does not even include the increases in rent that you would be adding every year, which can range around 3%. So in actuality, you'll be making more than $156,000 in 20 years. If you were to sell the house that you got as an inheritance today, you would just be getting $150,000 and nothing else. In this case, not only do you get to keep the house that's worth $150,000, it's also generating you monthly or generating you money on a monthly basis and a yearly basis. And on top of that, the house is going to be worth more than $150,000 in 20 years than it is today. All right, now let's discuss the second example. In this case, we'll assume that the house in question has a mortgage attached with it, where the first case had no mortgage. So we'll continue to say that the home value is worth $150,000 today. We'll say rent is $1,500 a month. And I've calculated that the mortgage for a house bought 30 years ago would be roughly around $625 if they put 10% down. Now, obviously, the mortgage is going to include property taxes and home insurance already included into that, so we're not going to add that here. We'll say property management, again, is $150 per month. Capital expenditures and maintenance is still $225. Vacancy, $150, which equals a total expenses of $1,150. Now, that leaves you with a much smaller profit of $350 a month. However, your reserves are still the same. So you're still generating $4,500 a month in reserves, which still comes out to $13,500 in 3 years. And this is key. A lot of people seem to forget, or, the issue that this causes, and a lot of people don't like renting, is because they're not financially planning for the future. All money that they generate, they essentially spend. In this case, if you're putting money away in reserves, if something were to happen, you have the funds available to cover any expense. And that reduces the amount of stress you have when owning property. And if you look online or you see experiences that other people have that they say, oh, I hate being a landlord, it's essentially because something bad happened and they didn't have the money to cover it. And they didn't have the money because they didn't put anything in reserves. So in this case, not only are you walking away with profit, you're also putting away money in reserves for anything that happens in the future, and that keeps you covered. Now, so in this case, since you're getting a profit of $350 a month, you're generating $4,200 per year, or over $84,000 in 20 years. Again, you would be making more because you would also consider the increases in rent you would have over that time. So even with a mortgage in place, you are still making a considerable amount of money per year, and you still get to keep the house that has been passed down to you. And this is what's so good about generational wealth. When you don't sell the assets that you have, especially the ones that are generating money for you, you can pass that down to your children and in turn make more money for yourself and eventually for them. And this is how people become wealthy and rich in this country. They keep the assets that help make them money, and they don't sell it and then use that money to splurge on something that isn't going to, benefit them financially in any way. So let's actually talk about that now that I brought that up. If for whatever reason you have to sell, never sell a property to buy a depreciating asset like a car, a boat, or expensive vacations. Instead, use the money to invest in appreciating assets. Let me give you an example about a story that I had back when I was in my college days working at Home Depot. I remember a gentleman coming in his 50s. He was there shopping for some goods to fix up his grandma's house. And he said he wanted to sell it. At the time, he thought it was worth around $100K, and he wanted to use the money to buy a used Bentley as a present for himself. And that's something you should never actually do. He essentially threw that money away instead of letting it work for him and generating even more money. That used Bentley he bought 15 years ago for $100K is probably worth $20,000 now. And that's if he's lucky. Imagine how much money he would have generated over the last 15 years if he kept that house and rented it out instead. He would have generated well over $100,000 in profit and still have that house, which is probably worth much more than that now. So in his case, he definitely wasn't building any generational wealth. He had a great asset and decided to sell it and throw that money away for something that is essentially worth nothing now, where In his case, he could have passed it down to his kids could have continued to pass it on, and that would have been extra money coming in on a monthly basis. Yeah, you're still working, but let's say you're making $5,000 a month. If you're getting an extra, $600 a month in income, that's huge. You could do a lot with that money. So that's why I definitely recommend anyone who gets a house as an inheritance to please consider keeping it and renting it out, because you'll be better for it financially in the long run. Well, that's all for today's video, so I hope you found it useful. If you did, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I'll be coming out with more content in the next couple of days, so I hope you guys can stick around for that. If you have any questions on this topic, be sure to ask them down in the comments below, and I'll get to them when I can. So until then, thanks for watching and take care.